So let's move now to our power crunch. Never let a good crisis go to waste is the old saying. And we are certainly witnessing the truth of that. From households to businesses, solar power is booming. At last, South Africans are taking advantage of perhaps our most abundant natural resource, sunshine. But the energy crisis presents other opportunities as well. And I'm joined now by James McKay of the Energy Council of South Africa. And that, of course, is a CEO-led initiative that brings together public and private sector interests in the energy sector. James, thanks so much for joining us. So the Council's got a fairly upbeat outlook on the energy crisis. Predictions that basically from the end of this year, early next year, things are going to get a lot better. We know the grid needs serious work to accommodate new power. We know that Eskom's in a financial black hole. What gives you cause for such optimism?
Good evening, Sally. Evening to your listeners as well. Yeah, so it really, I mean, don't waste a good crisis. It is such sort of an apt starting point because we are in a deep crisis. It's taken a long time for us to sort of get into this position. But I think that the crisis has really also spurred some real structural changes and shifts in the way we're working. So there's been no sort of time in the recent past that we have seen this sort of collaboration and partnership engaging between government and business. I think Eskom, certainly when we've just done 4 technical power station visits over the last 2 weeks, I was exceedingly surprised at how much recovery and restructuring has actually already been done. And the technical work, the people work, gave me a huge amount of confidence that Eskom is doing the right thing. I think that this will, without a doubt, contribute to recovery in availability performance of Eskom. And the other important part of this movement and structural shift is that we actually now do have a national plan. We have the Presidential Energy Action Plan. It's a good plan. I think business, government, Eskom, everyone has agreed and reviewed it and said, let's back the plan. So there are 10 focused work streams in the National Energy Crisis Committee who are mobilizing resources and getting things done. So I think it's the first time that I feel certainly very confident, and I think there's growing confidence in general, especially also with business, is that the 2 objectives of the Energy Action Plan, which is 1, solve load shedding and fix Eskom. I think that we're making good progress on that and we're heading in the right direction. This is going to be our crunch year in terms of load shedding. We're not out of the woods yet, but it will get better. And the second objective of the Energy Action Plan is fundamentally transform the energy sector. And again, I think we're seeing much more robust debate, a lot of technical work, a lot of market redesign. There's been a lot of media coverage about the ERA, so the Electricity Regulation Amendment Bill, which is going to go through Parliament, and that will liberalize our markets. So I think that there's a lot to celebrate. But we also do recognize load shedding is very tough on all South Africans, on business and people. And there's a lot of distrust from the sort of years of state capture, compounded by real difficult economic times through COVID. So it's sometimes I think it's quite easy to see the negatives and not recognize the glass half full. But we do have things to celebrate. I think it's going in the right direction. So that certainly is the view of the Energy Council.
Yeah, I mean, that is good news that there is that coming together, but the problems remain. How concerned, for example, are you about the state of the grid? Some people are very concerned. Others are saying, no, there's a workaround. It's not going to be as dire as having a situation where there's loads of solar power and wind power and no way to get it on the grid, for example.
Sally, this will be a big challenge, but we're not unique in this challenge. Internationally, it's pretty much grid. Every economy, as they go through the energy transition, has found that really the grid enablement, which is not just the capacity of the grid, but it's also the digitization, the changing skills. There's a lot of restructuring of how we move energy and link supply to demand. So we're not unique in this challenge. So the upside is that we can learn a lot from international experience that's moving ahead of us. But the first step in this is actually to unbundle our centralized utility. We probably are very slow in this regard of this reform. Even all the BRICS economies, most middle-income economies have already started liberalizing, have decentralized their markets, energy markets, and so we must move quickly and catch up. But I think that grid will be an evolving process, but at this stage we have a good plan. So again, there's been a fantastic amount of work done by Eskom in terms of the Transmission Development Plan 2032. It's been reviewed and peer-reviewed locally and internationally. It's a good technical design plan. I think everyone agrees with that. But we now need to focus on execution. And that, again, comes back to the value of this partnership between government and business, because this is a huge challenge. And I don't think that any one of these kind of groupings, either Eskom on its own or government on its own or business on its own, can really tackle the scale of what we have to do. But creating a partnership is the best opportunity that we do have.
And you mentioned unbundling, and we know that just in the last couple of weeks there have been some sign-offs for sale of assets or handover of assets. Transmission is one of the three divisions: generation, transmission, distribution. The grid would fall under transmission. As far as you understand, are we going to be looking at a situation where there can be a private investment in upgrading the grid, for example?
So again, this is going to be an evolving process. I think we've got to recognize that the energy transition is ultimately, it's a technology disruption. We've had many technology disruptions. You can go back as far as the 1900s. We went from horse and carts to automobiles. And the technology disruption doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. This technology disruption around energy has been accelerated by climate change. So all countries, and we can see this internationally, are moving through this disruption curve much quicker than what would normally happen if there wasn't the stimulus and the policy push from international climate change policy. So there are learning curves and sort of phases of development that we're going to go through all the time. The immediate focus for us as South Africa is decentralize the control of the grid, because that is where we want to create markets. We know that private sector is going to lead most of the investment in new generation because it's going to be decentralized wind and solar and clean technology. We will still need other technologies. We're going to have coal in the system for a very long time. I think there's a possibility in the future we'll also have new nuclear technologies. We do need gas to power. It will be an evolving process.
Yeah, I hear you. Can we do all that and grow jobs? Because we are desperate for jobs, especially among young people. The unions are incredibly concerned that this transition is going to lead to a loss of traditional jobs. And they're not completely convinced that the new jobs that they hear about are really going to be available for the people that require them. So talk to me about job creation.
Now, Sally, this goes to really the heart of what everyone talks about in terms of the just transition. The real challenge here being is if we don't decarbonize, we know that we will become globally less and less competitive, and ultimately we will lose jobs because we will deindustrialize, and we are a very emissions-intensive economy. So there's no disagreement. All the ministers, business, government say we must decarbonize. So that's the first point. But however, if we decarbonize in an uncontrolled way without a plan, we run the risk of either losing energy security, so going back into load shedding, and we know that that destroys jobs and especially shuts down small and medium-sized businesses. So that is also not an optimal outcome. So the optimal outcome is to decarbonize while we industrialize using clean tech opportunities. And that's really the focus that we've got to kind of put on a very practical pathway to make sure that we create jobs through the energy transition. And really that is the mandate of the Energy Council, is helping to support a thriving energy sector, but through an optimal energy transition that supports GDP growth, job creation, and decarbonization.
All right, thank you so much. It does sound potentially very positive, obviously not ignoring the problems, but James McKay of the Energy Council telling us that they are seeing some really great collaborations and positive signs that this is the toughest year for load shedding, but towards the end of the year, things are going to start improving markedly. All right, still to come.